Ed. We are faculty and administration that are committed to sharing our tips and secrets with you to demystify higher ed and bring you closer to a successful and restorative higher ed experience. Today, we're going to talk about, sorry. Today, we're going to talk about time budgets and scheduling your time. Managing your time is one of the hardest things to do in higher ed and really anywhere. And we want to talk today about how to manage your time, not just to maximize productivity and schedule in every hour of the day, but to develop a sustainable practice that won't lead to burnout and make you overwhelmed. So I'm Janelle Corrett. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Rhode Island in the Department of Biological Sciences. And I have with me Michelle Fonts, Assistant Dean of Diversity, Recruitment, and Retention in the College of the Environment and Life Sciences. Michelle, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank
And
you for
I'm
having me.
really, really interested to hear how you share what do you advise students when you talk about managing your time? And also, what are you hearing from students? What are their concerns?
Well, thank you. Now, I hear a lot of different things, right? But I think a lot of the times, a lot of it is about kind of accountability. Um, so for everyone, it's a little bit different that I talk to. So students really say, I just don't know how to really buckle down and have a calendar that I can follow or a time frame that I can follow on a consistent basis. So I start with,
Consistency.
yeah, the consistency of it is really huge. And it is the most challenging because if you don't want to do something, and let's keep it real, a lot of times you do not want to sit down and study, right? Um, in order for you to do it, you've got to find a way to have the mindset to do it. And everyone is different in the way that it works for them. And that's why it's challenging, right? Because you got to figure out your style. I can give you a few different tips, which I will, but it has to suit you. And so I'm just going to give examples of a few of the students that I work with. And I've worked with many students over the course of the last 6, 7 years about different strategies. It's different for everyone. But in general, there's a few things that we do. One is we kind of go through a timeline. I won't do the exercise I do with students in interest of time, but it's really
The
about,
irony.
yeah, right? It's about you really looking at what do you spend time on, right? So calculating the hours that you do things. How long do you typically sleep? How much time do you really spend eating? How much time do you do for yourself, whether that's the gym, whether that's hanging out with friends? How much screen time? Facebook, social media, right? So really taking a look at how you spend your time, kind of reflecting, and then thinking about, are there some things I could cut out to do studying? Absolutely, there are. But it takes that commitment to it. So if the end goal, looking at the end goal, is at the end of the semester, I want all A's and B's. I don't want any C's and D's. That's going to be your motivation to
Mm,
lock in your schedule when you're going to do that. So looking at your time and saying, all right, when I look at, there's a setting right in your phone, if you have an iPhone, that tells you how much screen time that you're using every day, right? And when I learned that little mechanism, I was a little
right.
frightened that the day I was spending 4 to 6 hours. I was like, wait a minute, that's ridiculous, right? How
Six
was I even
hours?
doing that?
I'm not
Well,
judging you.
because
No.
I would look at FaceTime, I would look at Instagram, like periodically, but it adds up, and you don't even realize it.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that. That was a year ago. I'm not doing that anymore. But I didn't realize it. And so us taking the time to reflect on how we spend the time is really important. And then the strategy for a lot that I tell is what do I do? Always have had this big pad that I write down what I need to do. It's a little hot mess right now, but this is work stuff.
That's what
This
works for
is
you, is
what
having
you
like the
say?
master list.
Yes, and I'm okay with not finishing the list, but it's in my face what I need to do, right? And so then I'm able to check things off. And as long as I do 2 or 3 things on each of those lists, I feel good about the fact that I got accomplished the things that
Right.
I needed to. And then I travel to the next page and carry them over. So
So I'm
that's,
a big fan of lists, Michelle. I mean, I love lists.
well, we have too much to do to not have lists, really. Like when you really think about on a daily basis what you should be doing, if you, the things that can, I mean, I think as we get older, the list grows and grows. But when you have an exam in four different classes within the span of a week, you've got a lot of time that you need to block to be able to get the studying done. Not
Right.
just the class time or going to see a professor, but you also need the times to go and make sure that you have the right energy to go spend the time. And a lot of students hesitate to do that and procrastinate, like we've talked about. But the students that are successful make the time to be successful most times.
So I agree with you. I think of it, back to when I started doing my own budget in college, not worrying about scheduling. Uh there's a concept like in economics called pay yourself first. I don't know if it's economics or just home budgeting. But the idea is if you want to save money towards a goal, pay yourself before you pay all of your other bills. Put that money
Yes.
aside. And I think it's the same with time that you prioritize what are your big goals, and you can map out your whole semester of when things are due and when your crunch points are, because when you have those four exams and you're behind and you have a bunch of deadlines, that's not exactly the right time to start figuring out your priorities. And you already know your priorities at that point. But we're still pretty early on in the
Right.
semester. We're still only like in a few weeks coming up on midterms. You could start now to budget out your time in a way where so I have a couple strategies that work really well for me, and I want to share those. First of all, I know when my best time to work is. Like my brain is functional and I've had my coffee and my rest and I'm ready. And I think being in that right frame of mind where you're like alert and ready, it makes the work easier. It makes it less, like walking through mud. So that's when I try to schedule my most arduous things. Like if I'm writing a really tough piece, or if for a student, like if you had a problem set that was really challenging or something like that. So I think that's really important, is to not fight against yourself. And this is what happens when you procrastinate, or when I procrastinate, which I just did. I mean, I don't think we're ever done figuring this out, right? I mean,
Mm-mm.
it's not like suddenly you wake up in your 30s and you're like, or 40s or whenever, and you figured it all out. It's just
No.
that there
Always
there
a
is
challenge.
there is a good practice though around like, okay, I know when is my good time to work, and you do the work, then it becomes more enjoyable and more fun, and it's less of a dread. I think procrastination is sometimes it's that you're really too overcommitted, right? And if you can edit out some of the things that are like really sucking up your time but aren't returning that investment, that helps. But also there's a certain amount of like, oh, I just am dreading this. And I think a lot of that dread comes from working on something and then it's just so horrible and you don't enjoy it at all. But you
And
might
the
enjoy
more
it
you
more.
put it off, the more you put it off, it builds, right? So
Yeah.
you had a chapter and now you have three. And now you have five because you're procrastinating. So I really want to focus on the point that you said. I just talked to a student about this the other day. When is your high energy? Is it when you get up and have a cup of coffee? Is it in the evening once you've done everything and
Right.
you feel like you can get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and you can sit and bang things? What is that time? That's the time to plan for that arduous or difficult task that you don't want to tackle. And you break it up. Don't try to sit down and do it all
Right.
at once, right? You don't,
Yeah.
it's not, if we are thoughtful and smart about the things we don't want to do, because that's quite frankly the ones that are the hardest, right? You're just not in it. Um,
I'm
make sure
laughing
you
because
crunch it
I
out,
deeply relate to that.
right? Crunch it out. I have to do that. I mean, even for the
Yeah.
simplest tasks, like I have a lot of emails that I want. There's an article or there's things in it, but I keep letting it go. And now in my inbox, I have 300 emails that have different things. They're not immediate. I take care of the immediate stuff that I need to return to people, but it's just sitting there and I'm letting it build and I'm letting it build. And then I said to myself this week, a half hour a day, I'm getting rid of them. I'm either reading it or it's going. Like you got to do
Yeah.
that because
So
if
that's
you,
another really good tip actually, is instead of doing it based on the task, like I'm going to do this thing until it's done, you
Yes.
could say, I'm going to work on this for 1 hour.
Yes.
And however
Yes.
far I get is how far I get, but I've made progress and I feel good about that. And
That's
so
it.
to be able to celebrate the effort that you put in, I mean, it just shifts your whole mindset to
It
like not
does.
dreading everything.
You are
So,
so right. I
you know,
I think
I
that all
can't
the
do a
time.
lot in an hour per se, but I feel better about myself when I've done my hour. The whole
Yeah,
rest of the
and
day works.
I'm telling students, right, like they really think about that. Like when you have an exam and you have a lot to do, you have the anxiety and stress of all the things you have to do. But if you put in some time every day, all of a sudden you've done it for 5 hours and you're better. Right. So it's about you changing your mindset, like you said, Nelly. I mean, that's the big thing. It's about stop putting off things that are just going to be worse as you go along if you put them off. That's a big deal. If we could get more
Yeah.
people, I won't just say students. There's a lot of people that
It's
that
everybody.
that do it. Yeah,
But I
you
also like what you said, Michelle. You said every day, but then you said 5 hours, not 7, right? Like you have rest days. And I think
that's
part of
right.
being with time is that when you do get overwhelmed, you start to feel like, oh, I just need to devote all of my time to it until it's done. And not only is that dreadful, like it's just a horrible experience, you can get burnt out that way.
Yep.
Maybe you're not even in a mental place where you could even do that. Certainly, I'm not in a lifestyle place where I can just drop my whole life and work on something for 2 days straight. I don't have that
Right.
kind of lifestyle.
Mm-mm.
But also, maybe you just can't bring yourself to work on something for 24 hours straight. It's not
Mm-mm.
productive way to work anyway, but I think if you are really at the point where you are so overwhelmed and you don't know where to start and you don't want to do anything, you're burnt out. You're really burnt out. And maybe a rest day to recoup and just make a plan for what the first thing you're going to do is, or the first three things you're going to do when you come back. Maybe that's the better strategy.
I That's exactly what when we're talking about planning of time and what's going to be done, I make sure that they build in time for themselves to disconnect. It, it's
Mm.
it's it's impossible to stay task oriented all the time. You just can't. No, don't do
Yeah,
that to yourself. Take time. It's okay to chunk out a time of each day for you to do what you want to do. That's important as well, because if you feel like you're devoting all time to tasks, you do not feel accomplished. You feel burned out, like you said.
right.
And that's a big deal.
And lately, with like the pandemic and everything, I don't just budget time like in the evening for myself. During my workday, I'll budget in 10 minutes every few hours to just sit and not check email and just, I mean, I don't want to call it
Rest your
meditating.
head.
It's
Like
kind of
just
zoning out, but just like a mental break.
yes,
Yeah.
very smart. And if you can get outside for that 10, 20 minutes too, just
Yes, a
walk.
walk.
If you're getting a little bit of exercise,
A little
absolutely.
sunshine. There's
Yep.
also a
So,
technique called the Pomodoro technique where
yep.
you write for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break, like a real break, no screens or anything. And then you go back in, you do your work for 25 minutes and you take a 5-minute break. And for me, that 5-minute break, it seems like, well, why not just work the full hour? But just that 5 minutes off helps me. Sometimes I'll go longer, like I'll do an extra half hour or an hour because I just feel like I have the energy then. So
Right.
it's really cool technique.
It is. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that we discussed is, some people are very visual with their time. And so, and it's helped me working with students to do better for myself. And at first, when I would put things in a calendar, but working with some students, they helped me to, I'm visual and I like color. So one student taught me, what you should do, color. Like, so everything that you have to do for work you put in blue, things you have to do personally you do in green, and then pink is you time. Like, make it visual and make it a fun exercise to say, I'm going to spend time doing what I want during this time. And when you see the visual, when you open up your calendar on a Monday, all right, as long as I have that time, whenever it is, I'll do this and I'll do this. And that's even building in time with friends or a partner, like really
Yeah.
being thoughtful. It sounds too planned, but if 80%
Well,
of that time, 80/20 rule, I believe for everything, because we cannot be perfect at any one thing. But if
okay. For folks
80%,
that don't know, I'm not saying me, but just what's the 80/20 rule?
So 80/20 rule is 80% of the time you are on point with everything you need to be. But 20% of the time, whether it's situational, if something happens in your family you didn't expect, or you're not feeling well, whatever, it is okay to have time that's not so regimented because things happen in life. But if you in your mind say, most of the time, which we say 80/20, most of the time I'm on point, but I need to leave room for myself to know that there are life things that happen that are challenges, hardships,
Okay.
whatever it might be, to make room in your mindset to know that things will happen. Don't let the 20% of the things that can happen take away everything for you and then you have to start from. Nope. Take 20% and deal with what you have to deal with and then go back.
Right. Oh, okay. So like acknowledge it, give yourself time to deal with it and then release it and move on kind of
Yes,
thing.
basically,
Okay.
yes. That's a
That's
good way to
interesting.
put it. Yeah,
Cool.
because some people get bogged down and they have one issue that comes up, a family, a friend, whatever it is. And because it's emotional and it takes energy, you get off track.
Yeah.
And so that's okay. I'm saying that that is okay because that is part of life. However, it can't be okay for longer than a small chunk of time, right? You've got to
Right.
deal with it, but don't you let everything else go because then that's just a pitfall to go low and you don't want that. So I
I
think
see.
that's important. So to have the visual, to give yourself space to know that there is breathing time to be able to do you, but also get the things done that you need to get done.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michelle. I think that we've shared a lot of different strategies today, so that's really exciting to me. And we will also add some comments to this post to talk about some of these time budgeting apps you can use, like Toggle, and scheduling things and lists like Trello. There's lots of online apps and stuff now. So if you want to add those to the comments, definitely do that, and we'll add some too. But thank you so much, Michelle. I think this was really great.
Yes, good for both of us and hopefully a lot of others. That's for sure. All right, you have a good day and take care, everyone. Be safe.
Bye bye.